Hello, everybody, and welcome to June 2024's Pitch Deck Review Live. In these pitch deck review sessions, I take a pitch deck submitted by one of the pitch deck subscribers, and we take a look at what's good, what's bad, what needs to be improved, and together we learn a little bit about what's what. Today, we are looking at a pitch deck from a company called SkyCycle. I spoke to this founder a while back, and they have a really interesting idea that I fear may be pretty tricky to execute on, but that doesn't make it a less interesting company. So let's take a look at what's happening with this company. Here we go. This is the deck. So the company is basically pitching an active wellness solution and saying that will improve wait times in airports. Now, it's an interesting company right off the bat. Nobody loves airports. Nobody loves waiting in airports. And I'm intrigued by the ride the wait type tagline and to see what this is. Now, the other things that show up on this very first slide is that this is a B2B2C company. So it's a company selling to companies that sell. It's a company that sells to other companies that then sells to consumers. And they're raising a pre-seed round, which is great because that's my favorite kind of round. It's when the dreams are still big and you still have a lot of shaping you can do with the company. All right, first out of the gate, they're talking about the health and wellness habits of travel. These guys have done some research. Now, right off the bat, I don't know who has done this research for them or if they've done it themselves. It would have been really good to have a little bit of a hint here at what the sample size is, who did the research, and all that kind of thing. But having said that, they're saying that 53% of people prioritize exercise when traveling, and the overall health and wellness market size is about $500 billion. Now, I am willing to agree that potentially health and wellness is a $500 billion business, but that is almost certainly not the TAM of this company, right? So the thing to keep in mind here is that your total addressable market, the way to think about it is if you were to somehow capture the entire market you're going after. Now, if they're saying the size of the health and wellness market is $500 billion, I know that healthcare in the US is worth about $3 trillion. So that sounds like it's roughly in the right ballpark. But this company is not going to be able to successfully take the entire market. And, this is health and wellness everywhere. So the question becomes, if you're focusing on travel, how are you going to capture the entire health and wellness market share? Now, it's a tricky one because if this company is focusing specifically on the travel industry, you have to figure out what that means to your users. And what I mean by that in this case is if you're focusing on travel, how big is that market? How much is exercise and wellness on the go as a market? It's probably not $500 billion, but I don't know what it is. And that's my first question that comes up here right away. Wellness culture is here to stay. Brands like Calm, Peloton, Apple, and Garmin live on our wrists and our ears. Yes, it's interesting to put Peloton on there. Obviously, Peloton is not a bike brand, but I also know that Peloton is currently circling the drain. They've done so many rounds of layoffs and all that kind of stuff. Strategically, comparing yourself to Peloton may not be the best time exactly at the moment. Okay, sitting is the new smoking. In a sea of chairs and limited amenities, it's difficult to achieve wellness in airports. Absolutely. Traveling causes stress. I buy that too. And how do you spend your time? The greatest frustration for passengers is the lack of amenities that appeal to their interest. Totally. What these slides are basically summarizing is that traveling sucks. If you're going on holiday once a year, airports are exciting. If you're spending your entire lifetime as a sales rep or somebody who travels for a living, it stops being fun real fast. And so I get it. I do agree that sitting is the new smoking sounds a little dramatic, but I do get that this is a real problem. The question is this a problem that people are willing to pay to solve? So let's see what the company says about that and see if we can find something there. 2024 is the perfect time for SkyCycle, a cycling experience where meeting passengers where they are in the lounge or near their gates. Okay, so they're talking about cycling, and I'm now assuming that they're renting out some sort of bike, so you can go for a bike ride around the airport. SkyCycle leverages the booming interest in health and wellness, is prompt to disrupt the antiquated airport industry with airport-focused innovation passenger hospitality. Now, I'm assuming that these are stationary bikes, but so far in this pitch, we haven't said that, I think. Let me go back. No. Ride while you wait. Okay. So maybe this is a bike rental company? If it isn't, then we've gotten to slide 4 or 5 and we haven't figured it out yet. Okay, meet the modern airport, where passengers read their wellness goals en route. Low impact exercise has some pretty beautiful benefits. Okay, so there's crosses through these. So these are the things you don't need to do. Yeah, okay. You can rent a SkyCycle right at the gate, meaning you can ride without the worry of missing a flight. Okay, so this looks like those unicycle things that you can ride around on that are electrified. I'm not sure if this is a bicycle. This graphic doesn't really explain to me what this is or how it works. It would probably be helpful to have a picture of a person using it here, just so I get a sense of it. Okay, skies. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it's like a kind of a recumbent exercise bike that gets rolled out to you wherever you're waiting. Okay. Designed for busy terminals to optimize space, the same user experience that our target customer expects. Okay, so you use an app. Okay. And it shows up and you can use it. Okay, so I have a whole bunch of questions here that came up as well when I was talking to the founder of this company, which is basically, I don't know, for one thing, in the picture on the right, I'm not sure how psyched I would be about somebody huffing and puffing right next to me. But also, if I were a traveler, I don't know how I feel about exercise like this right before I get on an airplane. I don't like the idea of sitting, doing exercise, getting all sweaty, and then getting on a bike. That feels like maybe not the best way to travel also. Your mileage may vary, but I'm of the opinion that if you're exercising, you should at least get your heart rate up a little bit. And if you do, then I don't know about you, but I'm going to sweat. And so I think actually strolling around the airport seems like a better way to get some movement. So I'm a little lost for what is actually happening here. Okay, active travelers want wellness. I buy that. On the journey through the airport, sure. After 1,000 interviews and surveys in a target market, we know our value. Our customers reach their wellness goals without minutes. We meet our passengers where they are. Okay, so this is some pretty decent market research on what the market size is, who's doing what, and they've set out the different target customers for this. So business travelers who travel 10 times a year, millennial leisure travelers who travel 5 times a year, etc. And so they've done some really interesting customer segmentation here, which I think is actually really helpful for the investor to understand who the target audience is and how they might possibly engage with this. With market demand and early validation, we wrote on. Okay, so now I am not sure because they're saying they have early validation, but I'm not sure what that validation is yet. Because here they say they've done 1,000 interviews and surveys. So if I were doing diligence on this deal, I would immediately want to know, okay, who did you survey? How did you survey them? Did you survey them at airports? All that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit missing here to figure out how good this data actually is. Okay, other than that, this is a good slide. It shows kind of a rough user persona thing. And when they show this, I expect them to say on the next slide, okay, and we're focusing on millennial leisure travelers or whatever it is. Okay, with market demand and early validation, we wrote on. Mobile app on test flight. Okay, they've done 4 beta tests. Does that mean 4 beta test rides or 4 sessions? So I would like to understand here what those beta tests actually entail. And they've done prototype iteration. Great. Research and okay, so what they've done so far is they have a patent. That's great. It says secured. I want to know what secured means. Is that a granted patent? Is that a patent pending? And if so, what is the patent for? That's an important piece of it. Then in 2023, they did some tests. And in 2024, they're fundraising and trying for pilot testing at MSO Airport. I don't know where MSO is, and there's plenty of space on the slide, so maybe we could spell that out. Save me a Google search in case I don't know off the top of my head what MSO is, which I don't. So next up, we have the hybrid business model, hardware purchase plus ride revenue. So these are not quite business models. This is the kind of market sizing. I'm not entirely sure what this slide is. Typically, as a business model slide, I would, if one cycle has 5 30-minute rides at $10 per ride, profit per year per one cycle is $18,000. So this is not necessarily how I would map out the business model side, because what I need to know here is, if you are doing B2B2C, I want to understand what is the actual business to business parts. And airports themselves, would they do this, or is this a subset of airport? Is this a part of lounges? Like this, what this tells me is that there is a lack of go-to-market strategy. We don't know how you're going to get your customers. We don't know how we're going to get the airports. So this is a kind of a fluffy slide to me. Although there's a lot of numbers here, it's a little bit death by numbers. I'm not fully on board with what they're trying to explain here. But the things that are showing up is that their COGS per unit, so the cost of goods sold, so the cost to manufacture one of these cycles is $1,200. And they're expecting to be able to do 5 cycles each, 18. Okay, so they're selling them with a really slim markup, really. That's $600 markup per cycle, which for hardware isn't super great. All right, because I'm guessing the actual cost per ride is where they're going to make their money. But it means that they have less upfront costs because the airports are paying for the cycles. I think that's a pretty smart move to ease on the cash flow on this. B2B pricing and revenue model. Okay, so that makes sense. It's $10 per ride for 30 minutes. Are people willing to pay for that? I don't know. I'd love to see that tested. And then they've multiplied out what the market size is and what they expect their financials to look like. Okay, I got there in the end. All the information is on this slide. I think there's probably a much better way of showing this off, so it's easier to read, easier to understand, and easier to follow. All right, so our go-to-market strategy from launch to profitability. Okay, they've done beta testing. They still haven't said what the beta testing actually involved. So I would love to have a little bit more. This is a really important piece of traction, right? And so whenever there's important traction, and by traction, I don't necessarily mean revenue, things you've done to de-risk the business. When you have really good traction happening, and a beta test is per definition traction, right? You're showing that you're trying to de-risk something of it. It's worth going into a little bit more depth to figure out what's the deal? What did you test? Who did you test with? What was the result of the test? So yeah, I'd love to see a little bit more outcomes here. And so the next few steps they have is the minimal launch, which is Missoula Airport. I guess that's what MSO is. That makes sense. They're going to do 100 people focus groups, secure lounges. Okay. That seems like a reasonable rollout plan. And I think they're saying 5 airports lounge partners with 5 cycles in each. That means 25 bikes out there by the end of year 2. This is a pretty decent SMART goals in terms of explaining what they're trying to do over the next few steps. I think this is pretty good. The expansive vision, movement and Zen to the travel ecosystem at scale. So here they're saying they're expanding geographically. They want to get to larger hubs and numbers of rides. Yeah, so basically the expansion plan is more airports, same product, more airports. That's a pretty straightforward and easy to understand vision. That's great. Okay, we will become a player in the market as an active wellness amenity. Okay, so now I am confused where these guys fits in. Oh, right, they're right in the middle. Okay, so movement and performance is Peloton, meditation, relaxation. Okay, so they're somewhere in the middle of movement and meditation and performance and relaxation. Okay. I'm not sure if this slide really helps me understand sufficiently what the differentiation is, right? If you're placing yourself right in the middle of a compass chart, it means that you're all but also nothing. It's very hard to differentiate. So yeah, I'm curious about how this lands with investors. And I see the goal of wanting to become a player in the market as an active wellness amenity, but I haven't seen the steps that the company is planning to do to get there. And so this becomes like okay, what are the pieces of the puzzle that need to fall into place for this company to be successful at what they're trying to do? The goal is great. Yes, become a player in the market for sure. How are we going to get there? So now I hope when I click next slide, that's what we're talking about. We've built an experience and monetized exercise one transaction at a time by thinking differently than brick and mortar gyms. First to market is rarely a positive, to be honest. iPhone wasn't the first smartphone. Google wasn't the first search engine. Um, First to market basically means that you get to make all the mistakes and somebody else looks at this and goes, oh, we can do better. So I rarely think that is worth shouting about, just because there will be other existing gym manufacturers or equipment manufacturers or vendors who already have a time with airports who can move much, much faster than this startup. And so first to market is really just a, hey, we found this cool thing. And unless you have rock solid patents and the money to defend them, that's going to get tricky. Convenient locations, I get it. You get footfall. If somebody sees somebody do this, it's the same idea with the shoe shine stands that you find at airports. I think rarely people go to an airport and think, I'm going to go get a shoe shine. But then when they walk past one, they're like, oh, I have half an hour to kill. My shoes could do with a shine. Great. So it's a great example of how to capture your audience. And in fact, captive audience is the very next step they have here as the kind of part of its life cycle. Airport incentives and revenue share. Sure, airports can make more money with this. That's great. And they want it to be self-serve. So use the app. It means that there's less staff needed for running these things. I think that's super clever. And I think the company hasn't proved any of this out. I don't know which of these things have been tested or shown to work. And so to me, as an investor, this is actually just a checklist for the stuff I want to grill them on. It's like self-serve. Tell me about that. Are people willing to self-serve? Can they figure the bikes out, etc.? Airport incentives, like how many airports have you spoken to? Do they operate on this? Can you find predicates? Are there other companies that have revenue shares? That kind of thing. The other day I was at SFO and there was this robot, the Cafe X, making coffee. The coffee was mediocre, but there was a novelty factor to it, right? I would love to talk to Cafe X to find out what their business model is. Do they rent the space? Do they pay the airport a certain concessions fee, whatever? Being able to talk about what is the mechanics needed for getting put into airports is a crucial part of this company's journey. And so far in the pitch deck, there hasn't been much about that. And so that becomes a big unknown and hence a pretty big risk. Captive audience, yes, I buy that. Everybody's at the airport. You're stuck. You don't know what else to do. Convenient locations, sure. And again, we've talked about first to market. Cool. This is the team. Looking at this team, what I want to see from a team slide is something that shouts out at me, wow, this is the one team that could do this. Nobody else could ever do this. And so without looking at the team slide for a moment, if I just put on my investor dream hat, what would I want this team to be? I would want somebody who has deep expertise with selling to airports, using franchising models, or whatever it is that the company wants to do, and has experience with B2B sales, getting these types of companies off the ground. I'd want somebody with, it sounds like they're wanting to manufacture their own bikes. So I want somebody on the team who has deep experience with creating smart exercise gear at scale, right? Somebody ex-Peloton, somebody from one of the other big exercise companies, or somebody who created other machines that go in airports, like something that ties to it. So that's the sales and the product side of things. I would also be really keen to understand what is the sales and growth strategy here. But really, the two big things are, do we have somebody who understands how to make these type of sales? And do we have somebody who can do this type of hardware manufacturing? So back to the team slide. We have Tana, who is a founder, great, global traveler. Okay, so she is an expert customer. She's the kind of person who might understand why this is a important thing at airports. That is helpful, but that doesn't necessarily scream, I know how this works. Similarly, I had a conversation with somebody the other day who didn't have a medical background, didn't have a medical tech background, didn't have a hardware background, had a pretty serious stroke. And they were talking with somebody and they were like, oh, I've had a stroke, so I want to help people with strokes. So far, I'm with them, right? And then they propose some sort of a medical device. There's nobody on the team who has medical device experience. There's nobody on the team who could really make this a believable startup. And so when I see an expert customer, I'm like, okay, I get it, but could somebody who suffered a stroke build a stroke product Or in this case, far less dramatic, can somebody who is an experienced traveler build a company in this space? So looking further at this, customer degrees? Oh, is a customer of what? Okay, I don't know what customer means here. Degrees in finance and design. Okay, so having a design degree is potentially helpful, although I don't know what kind of design this is. Is it product design? Is it mechanical design? Is it graphic design? Is it interaction design? So far, the CEO doesn't strike me as a slam dunk. Like from this slide alone, I wouldn't go, okay, I definitely have to invest. Then the rest of the slide is actually weird. We have a project manager, a developer, a strategic marketing and brand experience person, and a financial manager. Now, those are all important roles to have in the company, but unless they are co-founder levels, or co-founder level folks, what you often find is that the investors really only care about the founders. And that's because anybody can leave a job, right? It turns out anybody can leave a job at any time. And in the US, Europeans are often surprised to learn, you often have a 2-week notice period. So if you decide to leave today, you're gone by the end of the month, and then what happens? So the weight of this will be heavily on the founding team. Having a project manager who understands manufacturing is definitely a thing in her favor, right? So now you have somebody who can do the manufacturing side. We have a developer who launched a Finn scooter app for golf. I don't know what that is. Somebody who is a agency person on the branding and marketing side, and a financial manager. Okay, so there's still a couple of pieces of the puzzle missing, right? So when I made up my dream team earlier, I said that we needed one person who had an experience designing and manufacturing. Now we have somebody who has manufacturing experience at MMEC, Montana Manufacturing. I don't know what that entails, right? Did they run a line? Did they design a line? Are they a design for a manufacturing engineer? I'm glad that the word manufacturing appears on this slide. That's absolutely crucial. But it doesn't tell me that this is automatically the right team to invest in. You have a developer who've developed an app, yes, and at least here in the Bay Area, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting 20 developers who've launched apps. So I don't know whether that is sufficient to make me go, yes, this is the right team to invest in. Strategic marketing and brand experience, sure. That is an important role to do, but you can outsource that, you can figure that out. And neither marketing nor branding are necessarily exactly the center of the bullseye for the kind of company you're building here. It's B2B2C. So the final B2C includes a lot of marketing and branding. That's important. That's the customer facing piece. What isn't there is the first B2B. So how are you going to make these sales to the airports? I have not done a lot of work with people in that space, but I imagine making sales to airports is very complicated. For all the reasons that this team already outlined, that this is a great opportunity and it's a captive audience, blah, 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 everybody knows that. And so I imagine a lot of people will want to be at airports. So overall, I think this team slide, I don't have enough information to know whether or not this team has everything it takes to deliver this company, which I think is a shortcoming of the slide. There's a very good chance that these people are actually extraordinary, right? That Steve has deep experience. Maybe he's made exercise equipment before. That Mark, whatever scooter app for golf, is a wizard developer and can build this company really quickly. I just wouldn't necessarily expect to see it this way on this slide. And I'd want to talk to Tana, who I can see is on the call. Hi, Tana. I'd want to talk to Tana and figure out, okay, why you? Why are you the right person to do this? Why, if I was an investor with $10 million and wanted to build this company, why couldn't I go to Peloton, find their lead mechanical engineer and lead designer, hire them both, find a CEO who has experience with selling into airport, hire that person. Now I have a 3-person dream team who can build the prototypes and start doing sales, and then hire 2 people from who have experience working with a company like Foxconn or another contract manufacturer at scale. Now I have 5 people where I go, hey, these people are the right people to build this company. Your job as a founder is to really nail home why this is the perfect team that is definitely going to be able to deliver on the promise that this company poses. I'm not saying the team is awful by any means. I'm just saying that this slide doesn't tell the right story. Okay, we have de-risked the airport marketplace. Have you? Okay, so now I'm confused because if the airport marketplace has really been de-risked, then that completely changes the picture of this startup, right? If they have a way of putting this into 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 airports, then we're having a very different conversation. Now, here, the company says that they've de-risked airport marketplaces, and then there is 6 brands. And there's something missing here. This is a presentation slide, so a slide that you talk over rather than a send ahead slide. On its own, this slide is not helpful to me. Like, I don't know what to make of this slide and how this slide backs up the statement or the promise that they've de-risked the airport marketplace. Now, presumably, if the founder were to present this, they could say, oh, we have, I don't know, maybe with partnerships, maybe they have advisors. They say industry advisors, but I want to know who from these various industries are in here. I don't know. This is confusing to me, and I think it's actually okay that it's confusing to me. It's just, it shouldn't be in the send ahead deck. This is for the further conversation. I suspect that in this, they'll be able to really explain part of the challenges I had with this company, i.e., how is it going to go to market? How is it going to find its customers and all that kind of thing? By the way, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. My wonderful co-host Daniela is here to take the questions and pose them to me later. And we've got a couple of slides yet left to go. Our fundraising target is $450,000 to reach our milestones for the next 18 months, achieving profitability by year 3. Okay, great. Engineering, development, testing, expand team, marketing and pre-sales and launch, and sales and growth profitability. Now, the ask is fine. You can raise $450,000. I would say just make it $500,000, make it a nice round number, but that doesn't matter. To reach our milestones for the next 18 months and then profitability for year 3. So what I'm hearing here is that after 18 months, there's going to be another fundraise. And so if the company hits the milestones on this list down here, oh, no, this actually goes 3 years because we're talking 6 quarters. 6 quarters? Wait, that's 18 months. Okay, great. Okay, that has me confused because here it's an 18-month plan. So they have quarter 6, but part of that is profitability. And they say they're going to hit profitability by year 3. So now there's an internal inconsistency on this slide that has me confused. What's worse, though, is that these goals are not measurable. Like if I were your investor and I said, okay, here's $500,000. Let's execute on all of this. And by the end of the 18 months, you've hit all these goals. And that means you're ready to raise your next round, right? For a $500,000 round to me means you're probably going to try and do a $3 to $5 million round in 18 months, right? Let's call it $3 million. If they hit all these goals, can this company raise $3 million? So I look at what are the goals? The goals are engineering and development and testing. Now, I can't measure anything around that. Was engineering successful? I don't know. Was development successful? I don't know what we're developing. I don't know how to measure it. Is testing successful? Again, I don't know what the criteria are. Expand team, sure. Who you're hiring, why? Expand marketing and pre-sales, sure. What are the actual deliverables? Launch, cool. What are you launching? Much better goals here. Not engineering, but version 1 of the bike launched. Not development, but app live in the store. Not testing, but, and again, testing is kind of part of this. So I'm not sure if they're doing user testing, in which case they're actually doing market research, or whether this is app and product testing. So I don't know. But the important thing is if you're able to tie this to specific measurable goals, that becomes a much better use of funds. To what end? Expanding the team in itself isn't really a goal. Your goal is to de-risk the company. And so the question becomes, who are the right people for you to hire here in order to de-risk this company? Now, if instead of expand team, it says hire head of development from Peloton, hire head of sales from Cafe X, and hire whatever, right? Or something like that. So you have the specific personas that you're trying to hire. Now I understand why hiring these people helps de-risk the company and why when your $3 million round rolls around, you are actually in a much better place to actually raise that round. Marketing and pre-sales means nothing to me. Launch, okay, what are you launching? A much better goal there would be launch in 3 airports, with 5 bikes in each and with a goal of having 50 rides per day by the end of this cycle, meaning this and this much revenue. If you get those goals, then they're both measurable, so we know whether or not we're on target. They're specific because we know exactly what they are. They're hopefully achievable because you've made a plan. They're relevant to the business, and that's the important thing. If you hit all of these goals, it should be easy to raise your next round of funding. So it becomes a roadmap for how to navigate through the funding rounds. And finally, it should be time bound. So it already says Q3 to Q4, so it is time bound. You've got that box ticked. Being much more specific here, and I don't mean being specific in terms of a lot of words, but by this date, we will deliver XYZ so we can ABC. That's a really good target, and it helps me as an investor co-dream what it is you're trying to do with this company. Okay, enough said about that. Okay, they have an operating plan. I love a good operating plan, not gonna lie. So number of airports, year 1, year 2, year 5. So they have, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Product milestones, this is good. They're showing what they're hoping to do. Launch, pre-sales and launch. They have pre-sales and launch in both year 1 and 2. So don't know what that actually means. And again, marketing isn't really a milestone. I want to know what that means. Scale by expanding geographically, increase the number of SkyCycles. Yes. How many? Give me a number. Marketing spend. Sure. Revenue. Cost of goods sold. Fundraising. Okay, so confusing here is a few slides ago, I swear it said, so here they're raising 450K. Here they say they're raising 300K. So there's another internal, in year 2, they're saying Q1 to Q3, 4 on the fundraising, but I don't know how much they're fundraising. So anyway, this is the right things to have on the operating plan slide, but the content isn't quite there yet. I have a couple of posts, both on Pitch Guide and on TechCrunch, about how to do operating plans. Take a look at those, and it goes into a lot more detail for what investors are expecting on these slides. Okay, and then finally, we have, in a world captivated by hospitality and convenience, and in a place where people have time, help us change the way active people travel. I think this is great. I think this is a great final slide to help show off what is going to happen next. And it seems like they have fundraising milestones for the next 18 months. Okay. So this is a more detailed plan, but it still says small batch of cycles. I would have loved to see just a number there, like how many cycles are you launching? If you're going to spend 60K, you should have an idea of how many things. Update app migration from existing Xamarin App Store updates, testing, inventory. Okay, 15 cycles down here. So I'm confused because up there it says they're doing a small batch of cycles for 60K and then they have 15 cycles for 9K. But as far as I understand, so this is 15 cycles for $9,000, which 15 divided by 9, no, 9 divided by 15. That's $600 per bike. But if I don't misremember, COGS per unit is $1,200. So there's two different numbers here now. One is the $900 figure, and the other is the $1,200 figure. So now I am confused again about what the actual bikes cost. And up there it says small batch of cycles for $60,000, but if they are $900 each, so 60,000 divided by 900, that means that they should have 66 bikes already. But that doesn't quite align with... Anyway, I get confused is what I'm saying, because it seems like we have some discrepancies in the numbers internally. Expand team, marketing, CTO, aviation conferences. Okay, yeah, customer support, sure. Okay. Yeah, these are still not quite SMART goals, although they are better than they were. And yeah, app migration from existing app, like that is pretty detailed. I don't really care what platform you're currently using. I don't really mind like what's going on there. What I care about is what is the benefit to the user, right? Why do I as an investor care about app migration? I don't. App Store updates, I don't care. Testing, don't care. I care about revenue, inventory, sales, number of customers, number of rides, all those kinds of things. So a lot of the things on these funding milestones They're stepping stones towards a goal that isn't fully highlighted, right? So that's an interesting one. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight that as well. Cool. And that was the end of our presentation. So I think overall, this is a pretty good pitch deck. The pitch has many of the elements that I would expect. I wish that some of the language was different. I wish some of the presentation was done differently. I wish it was a little bit more detailed on certain things, but all of that is fine. I have much more fundamental problems with this company, which is this something people even want? And I spoke to Tana briefly a while ago, and what I suggested was like, look, is there a way to test this without setting up an assembly line and manufacturing a bunch of bikes? I feel like the kind of bike they have are the kind of bikes that people have under their desks, right? The kind of stationary bikes that is just a small unit with a couple of pedals. Is it possible to go to airports and get 100 people to try it out? And here, is this something you would pay for? Would you pay $10 for 30 minutes for this? Would you use an app to do it, etc.? It's possible that the company has already done that, but if they have, it doesn't show up in the pitch deck, which seems like an oversight. So I'm going to assume they haven't. What do you do about the sweatiness? What do you do this in lounges so people can shower after? Is this only for light exercise? And if so, why wouldn't you just go for a stroll around the airport? There's a bunch of pieces to this where I'm like, oh, this feels like a really risky business, especially in a world where this is a team that doesn't automatically strike me as, okay, slam dunk perfect team. They're doing something hard. Airports is hard, B2B2C is hard, manufacturing is hard, creating a new product is hard. They're biting off a lot of really hard challenges. And they're only raising 450K, which isn't a lot of money if you're doing hardware. I have a bunch of hardware background, and most products, it costs more than $450,000 just to get to the prototype stage, never mind doing the full production runs. And yeah, the deck is pretty good. The story's pretty good. It still has a whole bunch of questions for me. Now, the way around that would be to do a bunch of testing. Get bikes out to people and find out, are they willing to use it? Can you build a business model around this? Do this as a concierge MVP. It means you don't have to start up a manufacturing line. You don't have to pay designers. You don't really have to do anything. I think you can actually just go to, let's Google this together, folks. This will be fun. Under desk treadmill. That's not what this is. This is a bike. Under desk bike. Okay, one of these, yes. Here you go, $50. Oh, even better. Yeah, $50. This one looks decent. The company could buy 100 of these, right? Or 50 or whatever. Actually, they're even cheaper. On eBay, they're for $32. So you could spend not a lot of money to start testing this out among people. And that would make me feel a lot less nervous as an investor. If you came to me and said, hey, we're running this at 2 airports, we have a concierge MVP, we use Stripe on an iPad where people just pay to use one of these bikes for half an hour. They're paying us $10. And, the downside is, we're doing $50,000 worth of revenue a month, but now we want to build our own bikes and take the staff out of it because we don't need this many staff to run this. And so we want to make it a lot more efficient, a lot more self-serve. And that's where it makes sense for me to go and raise money and build a company. The way it's currently outlined, as I've done a bunch of hardware, I've worked with a bunch of hardware companies, it just strikes me as such a high risk proposition to go and build your own piece of hardware if you don't really fully know if you actually can even get it into airports and if this is something people would use. If you can answer those 2 questions, which you can do with this little thing, right? Hire 3 people, put them in 3 airports, give them 2 of these each, and get them selling. If you can answer that and you start getting traction, you start getting user feedback, now we have a lot more traction to help understand why the company would work and what the dynamics are. What do people want? How long do they want a bike for? What are they willing to pay? And all that sort of thing. Okay, that's quite enough of my monologue for today. Thank you all for coming, and we're back in 2 weeks with a Q&A. So if you have questions you want to ask of me, anything to do with funding, fundraising strategy, anything like that, if you're a Pitch Guide member, you will get an invitation and you can join us for that. Come ask me anything. And in about a month, we have another pitch deck review live, so come and check that out too. In the meantime, have a beautiful summer.